Welcome back to the Life Path Podcast, episode 4. Now, I strive to bring on very different guests to this show each and every week, and I'm delivering on that promise yet again this week. This week's guest is Corey Marshall. Corey is currently a technician at Preservation Auto Works in Brentwood, New Hampshire. Corey has spent the last 10 plus years in automotive customization and fabrication. He not only works on vehicles at his day job, but also works on his own collection in his free time, which currently consists of 5 unique vehicles. His favorite being his VW Rabbit. Yes, that's a thing. Corey's other passions include music, extreme sports, and world travel. When he's not on my podcast, you can find him as the co-host of the Purpose and Passion podcast. So as you can tell by my introduction here, this is going to be quite the masculine episode, but I promise that there is a lot in this episode for everyone to take away. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Corey Marshall. All right, Corey, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
So I brought you on the show because I wanted to show people kind of another side, another path that they could take. And I think like what you do is really interesting. I think you've found a lot of success in your career. And I know it wasn't necessarily like a straight path for you. I know you kind of had some other ideas about what you wanted to do when you were growing up, and you kind of finally ended up being a technician and kind of falling into this. And I kind of just wanted to show people, like especially like young men, that there are other things that you can do with your life that don't involve like going to college or sitting at a desk every day and working a desk job.
Yeah.
And you can still be like happy and successful and be kind of like living a dream basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I kind of want to just start off with you. Kind of the way I start off with everybody is just kind of like going back. So if you could tell me a little bit about your life growing up, and maybe some of your influences that you had.
Yeah, I could start directly with my grandfather. Growing up, he was the one that was always showing me around cars, and he had quite a collection of cars, and he was kind of the person that taught me that cars were more than just a vehicle to get you from point A to point B. And he kind of showed me that he had a passion for cars, for vehicles, and that kind of rubbed off on me. And like you had started mentioning before, I definitely didn't go straight into cars. There were a few paths that I started to go down, but ended up in cars, and I'm definitely happy to be where I am right now.
Can you tell me a little bit more? Can you expand a little bit more on maybe what you had thought about doing when you were growing up, and maybe why you had started to make those decisions or look into those careers?
Yeah, absolutely. In high school, everyone obviously is trying to figure out what path to take, and basically take classes in high school starting around what you're passionate about. I had started taking some classes based around architecture because I was really into architecture and like the history of it. And I'd always been into drawing and the creative side. So in high school, like I said, I took classes based around architecture. And when it came down to it, after high school, I wanted to continue doing that. But once I got into college classes based around architecture, I realized that it wasn't the direction I wanted to go in, because we were so far advanced now with architecture where everything was computer based and everything had like codes and like a direction that people wanted to go for. Whereas I was more interested in like the history of architecture and like hand drawing houses and more that aspect. So that combined with the thought of sitting at a desk for the rest of my life, I was like, all right, well, this didn't really work. This isn't the direction I want to go in.
Yeah, because you are, as you've kind of ended up in, such like a hands-on person, and like
Yeah,
it's not the same like being on a computer. And I think there's something like almost, I don't know, like romantic. I don't know what the word would be about. Like, like being, I remember you had that big drawing table, like being at the drawing table and like actually like touching the paper and like having like the pencils and like mapping out, the buildings and doing everything. I think there's just something, I don't know. Yeah, it's like a totally different career now than what it used to be.
right, definitely.
So the architecture didn't work out for you. What did you do then?
So around that time, I just had like your basic teenager jobs. I was working in. I was kind of like a carpenter, but not really a full carpenter. I was kind of just like helping in the shop and like, just making money.
Yeah.
So after the architecture thing didn't really work, another passion of mine had always been music. I knew from a very young age that music like spoke to me differently, and I wanted like at that point I once the architecture thing didn't work, I figured another path I should try to take was with music.
Mm.
So without doing a whole lot of research and planning, I applied for an online music program for recording and producing music, which I always wanted to do.
Mm.
But once I got into that program, I realized that everyone else in the program was already like deeply versed in playing music. I didn't know how to read music, and
Oh,
that
yep.
that was a huge issue that I didn't like I said I didn't do the research.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. So once I got in like to the classes and everyone's like, "Oh, this is this note." And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't read music." I just want to record it and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So so I slowly came to the realization that unless I knew how to fully read music, like play each instrument, that basically a recording career wouldn't really work out,
Mm.
which I was okay with because at the same time I kind of realized that I was more interested in music in like on the listening side of it,
Right.
like just how music speaks to me and how it moves me differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like even to this day, I can't go to work and like actually work with my hands unless there's music on around me.
Wow. You have to have like a beat to like go to.
Yeah, I absolutely do. And it'll be funny. The boss that I have right now, if for some reason the music shuts off in the shop, I'll literally stop and be like, all right, we got to put music on because I'm starting to hear voices in my head.
So you like the music because it keeps the voices away.
Not really, but I like to joke about
I get
it.
it. Yeah. I mean, I learned how to read music when I was like in fourth grade, but,
Yeah.
and I played violin like not very well for like 12 years. So, yeah, I guess I was lucky enough to be able to learn how to read music, but I was never a musician and I never had that kind of calling in that way, like to ever pursue it as anything.
Hmm.
And like, I think a lot of people who are musically inclined don't necessarily know how to read music and they can kind of just pick up an instrument and kind of like play around with it and figure it out. I totally don't have that. So, it's unfortunate that like a program like that would require you to. I guess I get it, but I just
Yeah,
don't think that everybody that is like musically inclined necessarily does know how to read music.
right. I agree. And I think it was kind of going back to like the same ideas with the architecture, like
Mm-hmm.
because of where music is today,
Yeah.
you have to fit into a certain criteria in order to like take the college classes and get the degree and
Of
do it
course.
that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I know plenty of people that aren't like that aren't fully a musician,
Mm-hmm.
but have made successful recording careers
Yeah.
just by doing it and
Exactly.
knowing people and getting into the community.
Mm-hmm.
So
So, how long did you study that for?
music,
Yeah.
um, I think it was only a semester or
Y-
two.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then you were just like, I can't take this anymore.
pretty much.
To
Yeah, it was a combination of realizing that it wasn't going to work out mixed with like failing a couple classes because I
Yeah.
couldn't read music.
Yeah.
And I like tried to learn, but once you're already in it and you're trying to learn it, it's too much pressure.
Mm. That must have been a really hard time for you.
Yeah, it was, but I mean it's I took it as just a stepping stone, and that wasn't my career path.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you picked yourself up and you moved on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And what did you do
Yeah.
after that? After that, where did the road lead you?
After that, I had actually been laid off from my normal day job, and a friend of a friend owned a transmission shop, an automotive shop, and I'd been talking to him, and he said that he could use someone to come in and help out around the shop and order parts for cars and do up the bills for customers. And me being already kind of interested in cars from my grandfather and just interested in cars because that was right around the time I started driving and fixing my own car.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I went to work for him. Yeah, that's basically where it all started.
Yeah. And so, what were you able to learn when you first started working in the shop? I know it sounded like you were doing a lot of kind of just assisting and, like you said, billing and things like that, but were you able to start to pick up some like information? Were you able to like start to learn about cars more while you were there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I started learning right away. Basically, like I had mentioned, my job was ordering parts for the cars that were in the shop. So I was basically like hands-on with the technicians at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
they'd show me around the cars and tell me what parts I needed to order, and showed me what parts were what on the car, which was pretty cool.
Yep.
And it was a pretty relaxed shop, so I had time. You know what I mean? I had time with each car and the
Mm-hmm.
technician, and they'd show me how to fix things. And yeah, it really wasn't long until I was turning wrenches on cars on my own in the shop. And basically, at that point, I became an apprentice for a technician.
Now, was that because they had, seen the potential in you at that point because you had, started to kind of prove yourself by working on the cars, or was that like an open position that was there, or how did that come about?
I definitely think that they saw me taking initiative and interest in working on the cars.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that someone else could have gone in there and just ordered parts. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's their job is order parts. But I was always, because of how I am, I've always been hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
So and I've always wanted to fix things. You know what I mean? That's how I'm wired, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So. So yeah, I basically started small, and I'd do little jobs here and there when other technicians were busy. And yeah, and it wasn't long after that where I had my own toolbox and my own lift, and I went from there.
That's awesome. Can you
Mhm.
tell me maybe a story about some learning that you had experienced there? Is there anything that you like remember messing up as you were
Yeah,
learning? Because it's really an informal education, right? So you just tinker with it, and if it works, it
yeah,
does, and if it doesn't, then whoops.
yeah. I can I can definitely tell you a few stories of messing things up initially. There was one there was one that I remember pretty specifically. A truck came in for just an oil change. So my boss was like, "Yeah, just bring this in and do the oil change." So I did. I brought it in, put it on the lift. I drained the oil. I replaced the oil filter. And one thing that I wasn't aware of because I was basically fresh as a technician was sometimes when you take the oil filter off the car, the gasket will stick to the engine. And then when you take the new oil filter, there's a gasket already on it.
Oh.
So I went to put the oil filter onto the engine, and there was two gaskets,
Oh no.
and I didn't realize because it goes on like you can't tell. So I put the truck down, I fill it up with oil, and I go to start the truck, and obviously with two gaskets, it can't seal. So all the oil from the engine came out
Oh.
onto the floor and all over the shop. So that was the best learning experience, like right out of the gate.
That's great.
Yeah.
How long were you there for, and did you end up kind of moving up to another position while you were there?
I worked at that shop for 3 years or so, maybe 2 years. And yeah, that was basically just an apprenticeship for me.
Hmm.
By the end of it, I was like a full technician,
Yep.
but still like I would say like a B level technician, just
Okay.
doing basic stuff. And from there, that shop kind of got slow, and there weren't the need for me basically wasn't there, so I ended up getting laid off.
Hmm.
And from there, I ended up working at another shop, like a couple towns over, like another friend of a friend.
Hmm. That's how it works in New Hampshire.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, yeah, like I went into work one day and my boss was like, oh, unfortunately, we don't really have the work, so I'm gonna have to lay you off. But if you go down the street to this guy, he'll take you in, and that's pretty much what happened.
Well, that was nice.
Yeah.
So, what did you end up doing at the new shop? Was it similar, or was it a different type of shop?
That shop was actually a used car dealership, so there was a few more techs, and there was a lot more vehicles like in and out. But I did basically the same thing, like general maintenance and getting the cars and trucks like fixed and ready to go on the lot to be sold. But yeah, it was good because it was a lot of repetition and a lot of like just getting used to being a technician.
Right. And I'm gonna input my memory into this. Isn't that when you became like state certified as well? That's a big thing, right?
Yes, I actually became state certified at the first shop that I
Oh,
worked
did you?
at. Yeah, as basically as an apprentice, I got it's the state inspection license.
Okay. Because that's a big part of like working on cars, right? Is having that.
Yeah, it is. And actually, what's funny is at the time it was like huge for me, and currently I don't even have
Oh,
that.
wow.
Yeah, which is funny because of the different work that I do now,
Right.
having an inspection license isn't really necessary.
Right.
But
That makes sense, I guess.
yeah, at the time it was pretty big.
Yeah. What were some highlights or maybe low moments that you had at this shop? What was it like?
At the second shop, I can definitely say that it was a lot of repetition, like I
Yeah.
mentioned before. It was mostly a used truck dealership, so
Mm.
I literally saw like a lot of the same trucks over and over again. But at the same time, I got good at working on those trucks, and because of the way we were paid, I did make a good amount of money just because I could finish the trucks quickly and get paid the hours basically required to fix them in
Yep.
a shorter, if that makes sense, because we were flat rate.
Yep.
And that was also the time where I started buying projects of my own and kind of building vehicles of my own.
Mm.
So
More
yeah.
money, more projects.
Yes, exactly.
So do you remember what your first project car was that you purchased?
That I purchased, I would say was, oh, that's a good question because there were like several right around the same time. Um, I had a I had a
An addiction.
lift yes, I had a lifted Chevy truck at the same time that I had a lowered Chevy truck. Yeah, I had a Ford mud truck like a little bit previous to that.
Hmm.
And shortly after that, I bought my first Audi, which was kind of a big turning point for me.
Mm-hmm.
I bought my first European car, and like working on that and starting into that, I was like, okay, I kind of like the European stuff more than like Chevy trucks.
Yeah, after working like Chevys and Fords like all day, every day, that must have been like such a huge difference, like a 360.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the engineering that goes into a European car compared to like just an American truck, it's like it was huge, and it was a turning point for me for sure because I was like turned on to this new venture, I guess.
Mm-hmm. New car scene,
Yes, exactly.
not just lifted trucks.
Yeah.
So, how long did you stay at that job for?
I stayed there for what I would think was 3 years. I think it was about 3 years.
Mm-hmm. And what led you to finally leaving there?
There was some things going on with some of the salesmen, and me, I was already at a point in my life where I was like straight edge. I was like, no drugs, no alcohol. Like this is, you know what I mean? And a few of the salesmen were not like that. And they
You don't
had,
say.
yeah, they had dabbled into some drugs in the workplace. And at one point, I told a superior, and because it was affecting my job at that point. Yeah, and my superior didn't believe me. And a couple days later, I was let go for some mistake made on a car that was like irrelevant. And that was that. And I packed my things up and I left, and I knew I didn't want to be in that scene anymore.
Well, I mean, it obviously sounds like it worked out for the best, but like these are the stories of why I am in human resources and why I think HR is so important. I know in like these small organizations, like it doesn't exist, but that's like where it needs to be. I can't tell you how many people that I've heard of that like work in these small businesses that have been taken advantage of, that have like seen like all these illegal things happen and nothing gets done about it. And it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
like
Yep.
like that's
That's to
like
that.
completely illegal for them to like that's you'd be called a whistleblower in that situation, and it's completely illegal for them to fire you for that.
Yeah. Like I said, at the time, I was kind of okay with it
Yeah.
because there was like a lot of that type of thing going
Mm-hmm.
on, and I wanted to be out anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep, not worth it.
yep.
So did you find another friend of a friend to work for after that, or
No, from there I just went to like Craigslist for jobs. And from there on out I ended up at like a couple of different like small dealerships and small mechanic shops
mm,
basically, repair shops. None of them really like vibe, none of them really like worked out. Like I would just go to work and do my job and go home. It wasn't really like any sort of a connection for me.
mm,
So yeah, I kind of like floated between the two.
yeah,
A few.
yeah, that's important to have that connection with your workplace, because it's okay at first just to be making money, but after a while it I feel like it wears on you if you're not having a connection with like, the people you're working with, or you're not excited about the work that you're doing. What did
Yeah.
you how did you end up kind of moving into a space, or where how did you find like your next position where you were actually maybe excited about it?
Yeah, I can definitely get into that because I know exactly when it started changing for me. There was one point where I was between jobs, between shops. I had packed up my tools and like moved them back to my house and stuff like that, and basically started the search for the next position. And I stumbled across a place kind of local to me that specialized in European vehicles, and the position was like a semi-entry into European cars.
Mm.
So I applied for it and I went in for the application, and I immediately vibed with the owner of the company. He was kind of younger. He was probably like 40 or 45.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we kind of, because our ages were closer, we could kind of vibe, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in the position, and I kind of made that clear. And he basically gave me the opportunity to try it out. So I moved all my tools there and right away I knew, like within the first couple of days with the cars that I worked on, I knew right away that like that's where I wanted to be,
Mm.
So it was really good.
At that point, was most of your experience with European cars through your own vehicles, or had you kind of picked some things up while you're working at the other shops?
Mostly through my own vehicles. I'd had a few Audis at that point. A few friends of mine had Volkswagens and BMWs. At a couple of the like small dealerships that I've worked at, I dabbled a little bit in like some of the European cars like on the lot, but I didn't at that point. I hadn't done anything like super in depth with the European cars. I'd still done like maintenance stuff,
Mm-hmm.
nothing crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, once I started working at this European place, I immediately got in depth with European cars, and that definitely opened my eyes to it all.
So you were doing like larger projects, it sounds like, on the cars.
Yeah, because a lot of their customers, it seemed like they'd have their newer European cars, like that they drive every day, and then a lot of them had older stuff that
Mm.
they'd like drive on the weekends or whatever, and we'd work on both of them. We did a lot of like not quite like full restoration stuff, but like someone would be like, "Oh, I have this old European car that doesn't run. Like, can I bring it in and have you guys go through it and get it running?" And that for me was like a passion. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
that was like, all right, this is what I want to do. I want someone to bring me a car that like hasn't ran in a while. They don't know how to fix it. I get into it and like replace a bunch of things and like, really work on it and get it running and have them be able to drive it home was like, yeah, it was really interesting to me.
Yeah. And what a great learning opportunity as well to be able to do that. Like, have to really go through the whole car and get it.
Yeah.
Literally, it's not running and have to get it running again.
Yep, absolutely.
Was the owner someone that was like a mentor to you during this time, or somebody else there?
Yeah, the owner, his name was Ben. He was definitely a mentor, as well as all the other techs there.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely at that place I made lifelong friendships. You know what I mean? And being able to work like in an environment that was different from other shops, I felt like in this shop everyone worked together, and I've definitely worked in some shops where like you did your own work and like maybe you talked to the guy next to you, but
Mm.
like it just like I keep saying the word vibe and
Yeah.
like working in that position, it was all a vibe. You know what I mean? It was
Mm-hmm.
like we had fun, we worked together, we got like jobs done faster and more efficient because we worked together, and
Yeah.
it was a really good environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the social aspect is so important, I think, especially for a job like that. Because who wants to just be working by themselves and like be in their own little like area all day without having like human interaction or, cracking some jokes or whatever? Like, I'm sure like it can get stressful at times when you're trying to work on something and it's not going the way that you plan it to. So I think it's
Oh,
important to be
absolutely.
able to like, blow off steam and really like be able to partner with your coworkers in that way and maybe, bounce things off of one another.
Yeah, definitely. And that makes me think that was definitely the first job that I had that I would wake up in the morning and I was like excited to actually go to work.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Is this also something that started to fuel your passion for your projects further as well?
Yes, definitely. This was definitely a time where I got deeper into my own projects and I had more confidence,
Mm-hmm.
basically,
Yeah.
to dive deeper and change different aspects of the car.
And how long were you at this position for?
I was at that place for about 3 years as well. 3 years seems
Hmm. There's a pattern.
yeah.
3 is your lucky number.
Yeah.
Now, was this something that like did
Yes.
this end hopefully on a good note, or what ended up making you leave?
It ended on a relatively good note. I was going through a difficult time in my life, and I can fully admit to missing a few days of work and my productivity slipping, and my boss basically just explained that, and it was right around the time where it was getting into the busy season
Mm.
and productivity had to be kind of like you know, as anyone running a business knows, like if the productivity isn't there, unfortunately something has to change.
Yeah.
So I was let go, but like on the best possible terms. Like I said, they're still all really good friends of mine. I still go visit the shop all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah, but at the time I was going through a tough period, and
Yeah,
yeah.
it happens. So it's just like a strict business decision, basically, that they had to make.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And when he sat me down and talk about it, I could definitely tell that he was kind of torn. He was definitely emotional. I was emotional. So like no bad thoughts, no bad feelings, hard feelings.
Hmm.
We just parted ways.
So where did you go from there?
From there, actually, if we take half a step back, while I was working there, I started renting my own shop to basically work on my own cars and like help friends with their cars. And basically at that time when I was let go from there, I decided to not find another job and I would just try to make my own shop work at that point. I'd started trying out a few different things in the automotive world, more than repair and like customization.
Mm-hmm.
I basically started doing what's called liquid wrap. It's basically like paint, but it peels off like vinyl wrap. I had done that for several years, basically in my own shop, and basically started the business doing that, as well as repairs and customization on cars as well. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Was that something that was common in New Hampshire? I feel like I don't, not that I'm in like, the know, but I don't know of anybody else that like did that. Was that like a thing that I was not seeing, or were you pretty much the only one in the market doing it in the area?
Right when I started doing it, I was definitely one of the only people in the Northeast that was doing it. There were other parts of the country that had already dove into it pretty deep, and because of like social media and the internet, basically, I kind of saw what these people were doing, and it really interested me just because of my artistic mind.
Yeah.
I wanted I wanted to dive into that. So yeah, I was kind of one of the first people up in the Northeast to start doing that.
And how did that business go for you?
As any new business, it definitely has its ups and downs. I was still young at this point, and like looking back now, I know that I didn't run the business correctly. I if I could go back, I would do it differently. There were definitely a lot of times where I didn't spend the money that the business made back into the business
Mm-hmm.
correctly. So I mean, obviously hindsight is 2020, but if I could go back, I would do it a lot differently.
Yeah, I mean, you're a young man who has this like car fever. So I can imagine, like, I'm sure a lot of the money was probably going to your own projects.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, it
Yep, that
goes with your
happened
passion for
definitely.
it, right? But yeah, I mean, if you're not, if you haven't come from running a business before, it's hard to know what to do if someone's not there, like telling you how to do it, or if you haven't gone to business school. But I think failing like that is important because now, like, like it taught
Absolutely.
you some lessons, it sounds like. So even, even if things didn't go as you wanted them to, I think you still came out of it with learning something and with gaining something from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, having my own shop in the future is still like, it's still the goal.
Mm.
And now, because of the way I did things incorrectly in the past, I
Yeah.
now kind of have a lot better idea of how I want to do them when I finally take the plunge back into being my own boss, basically, and running a shop. And I mean, my ideas of what I want to do for the business have changed a
Mm-hmm.
bit now too,
Yeah.
but it all comes back to basically running a business correctly and having it be successful.
Yeah. So how long did you continue that business for?
I was probably on my own for 3 or 4 years. Like I said, it was a roller coaster. There were
Mm.
there were a few times where I had to like work for friends or like help out at whatever I could basically to make money.
Yep.
And yeah, I did that for a few years. I probably should have not done it for quite that long, but
Well, it
yep.
sounded like it
So
was something you really loved and it's what you really wanted out of life. So it's hard to give that up, you know?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So what was your next adventure?
My next adventure is actually a pretty cool story. So, like I said, in my own shop, things are kind of rocky, like up and downs. I needed to make money here and there. I got a phone call, and it was totally random. And it was this guy. He's like, "Hey, my name's Bear. I own
Bear
I own a
Grylls?
shop." Not Bear Grylls, but he's like, I own a shop down in Massachusetts, it's in Tewksbury, so I know it's kind of far from where you live, but we kind of do things a little bit differently here. We're a performance shop. We work on a lot of race cars. We have dyno in-house, and I heard through the grapevine that you're a really good technician, and honestly, we'd kind of like you to just come to the shop and I'll show you around and like just see what you think. And I was like blown away. I was
Wow.
like, what? Who are you? Like, who am I?
Am I
What?
dreaming?
Literally. So I was like, absolutely. Like, I'll come there right now.
Yeah.
I did. I didn't, but I was like, yeah. So I'll come down. So yeah, a couple of days later, I went down. And as soon as I walked in, I knew that like this shop was like totally different from any other shop that I've ever been in. And like immediately I opened the door and there's like a few of my dream cars like
Oh
on the
my
lifts
God.
being worked on. And I'm like, am I here right now? Like, is this real?
Did I die and go to heaven?
They called me to come here? So So yeah, I basically go in and I meet everyone that works there. It's a relatively small shop. There's Bear the owner, there was a guy in the office, and then there was one other technician who now is one of my best friends to this day. This was like 4 years ago from now,
Hmm.
I think.
Wow.
Um, so anyways, I go in, I meet all the guys, I talk to them a little bit. We basically they all give me a tour of the shop. So we walk into this first part of the shop. There's a few lifts, there's like toolboxes and there's cars on the lifts. And like we're just talking, you know what I mean? We're just talking like we talk about some of the cars that are on the lift and I point out some things that I like and like they tell me what they're doing to them to change them and basically what performance modifications they're making and we kind of go through this part of the shop and then like we get towards the back and there's a door and I'm like, oh, okay, this is like a door like to outside or like to wherever. So they open the door and they're like, all right, we'll go through here. And we go through this door and it's another shop the same size as the shop we were just in with like a bunch more cars.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, okay, so like you guys have all this too, and in that part of the shop was the dyno. Do you know what a dyno is?
No, please explain.
Okay, so a dyno, I think it's a dynometer is the full word for it. Basically, a dyno, you take your car, your performance car, and you strap it on a dyno, and under the wheels there are rollers,
Okay. Yep.
and when you drive the car on the rollers, the roller measures how much power your car makes.
Oh, okay. It's a treadmill
What?
for cars.
Yes, exactly. And it's really useful for measuring more than just the power that your car can make. It helps in tuning the car to make the most power and to be the most reliable making that power.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very useful tool.
Mm.
So that was in the second part of the shop that we had walked through. They gave me the tour of like that whole system, the dynamometer, and how that worked and stuff. And we kind of continued talking and like got back to the back end of that shop, and there's another door.
Oh my
And I'm
God.
like, oh goodness, there's another door. And they go, all right, well, we'll go through this door, and this will be the last part this will be the last part of the tour. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we walk through this door, and it's a massive warehouse of car storage. And like some of the cars that were in this warehouse literally blew my mind. There was probably like 40 to 50 cars back there. Some of them were kind of like in queue waiting to be worked on in the shop, and other ones were just like customers that needed to store their insane cars somewhere besides their garage or driveway, basically. So we walk around all these cars, and I'm just kind of like blown away. I'm like, I can't believe I'm like here, and they called me to come here. This is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So we just continue talking cars, and like we all talk about the cars we like back there, and like they show me around. And at one point we kind of just, they're like, all right, well, this is the shop, and we'll go back out to the office and talk out there. And we walked back through the different shops and got back into the office, and Bear sits down and he's like, hey, just take a seat right here. So I sit down, and he goes, so when are you available to start? And I'm like, what? Blown away. I can start tomorrow. I can get my tools here.
Wow.
So, yeah. So needless to say, I moved my tools there, and that was basically when I started working in the performance side of automotive.
That is a really crazy story.
Yep.
That really shows how important it is to make connections with people, and how that and like word of mouth can like literally land you at this crazy dream job just by
Absolutely.
like getting to know different people and showing them your skills.
Yeah, it still to this day blows me away that they called me to come there and work. And yeah, it's crazy.
So it sounds like this was totally different than anything that you had done prior to this. Much bigger place, different kind of vehicles that you're working on. Race cars, I'm guessing, are a lot more fickle, and there's a lot more detail involved because it really has to be like tuned to like a very specific setup, so they're running like properly, because one little thing could like make it like blow up, I'm guessing. Right?
Exactly. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, everything was a lot more meticulous. Safety was a huge thing. We had to like make sure we didn't miss anything as far as safety went, because it's not like a regular car where if something breaks, you pull over to the side of the road and you call a tow truck. It's people pushing these cars to the absolute limits, and if something breaks, it could be catastrophic. And because of that, we had to take things a little bit more seriously, which was good for me because I'm kind of meticulous anyways.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out. But yeah, it also basically starting more in the performance realm of automotive kind of opened my eyes to all of that. And yeah, I got to dive really deep into projects, and I got to basically start projects from the start and get them all the way to the finish, basically. And yeah, and it was also rewarding.
Yeah, that must have been really fulfilling.
It definitely was.
Do you have any like really like memorable moments that you can share about working there?
It's hard to pick. It's hard to pick like just one. There were so many like important race cars that we worked on, and there were definitely a few of my own projects that I got to do there that like meant a lot to me. There were a few cars that I basically did engine swaps in, which means I took an engine from a different car and put it in a car that it didn't quite belong in, but because it made more power and was a better engine, it was worth it to put in a different vehicle. And that was super rewarding for me to be able to take two parts of a car and put them together and have that be able to run and work and be able to take to the racetrack and race on a racetrack after was like huge for me.
Were you able to actually, like race your vehicles?
Actually, this kind of leads me into another portion of the business that they had at Ace Performance. They were a dealer for a certain car called an Aerial Atom, it's basically like a race car. They're not street legal. They don't have like a normal body panels on them. It's basically just a frame for safety and an engine and four wheels.
Okay.
So
Very
they're very
basic.
fast. Yes, very basic, very fast, very track-oriented cars. And yeah, we got to drive them all over the place and got to take them to track days and as well as other race cars and got to test them at the track and see our customers drive the race cars around the track. And we did what was called track support, where you basically go to the track with your customers that had these race cars, and if anything went wrong, you were there basically to fix them, which was pretty cool as well.
That is really cool. Were we able to go to the track in, was it Lebanon?
Yes.
That's the big one, right? That the NASCAR does races at?
In Loudon.
Loudon. That's the one that I was thinking of. I used to live right over there. That's what I can't even remember what it's called.
Yeah. So a lot of the cars that we worked on were more like road racing cars,
Okay.
not quite like NASCARs.
Okay.
So at Loudon, they did have a road course, which basically means like more bends and
Like rally?
Yeah, kind of like rally, but all tar, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, like a road course.
Okay.
And yeah, Loudon had a pretty good road course there. There's also the new one up in Tamworth, New Hampshire, I think it is.
Okay.
It's called Club Motorsport. That's just a road course, which opened up, and that's like an amazing track. And we got to go there a few times. So
it's about the only thing in Tamworth, eh?
Yes. That's why they put it there.
Exactly. It's perfect. So, how long were you there for?
I was there for 2 years.
2. Okay.
Yeah.
And what ended the dream job?
Basically, my friend John and I had in this whole time, like this whole 2 years that I had been working there, we'd always talked about starting a shop and like what we had planned, which is still currently, like I had mentioned before, my plan for the shop is still what we have planned. And in this time, him and I had basically started traveling the world. And I had been traveling everywhere. And towards the end of my time at this shop, I was traveling more than I was working.
Oh, jeez.
Going back to anyone trying to run a business, it's not going to run correctly if your technicians are trying to travel more than they're trying to work, which I totally understand. And at one point, I had already taken off like a couple of trips during the year, but one trip came up that I couldn't say no to. So basically, John has a collection of cars. He has more cars than I do, like very, very nice cars. Several of his cars have been in magazines. So anyways, he had one car specifically. It was a 1981 BMW 7 Series. It was a UK car, so the steering wheel was on the right-hand side, and having that here in the States is pretty rare. So this is a one of a kind car. So John had that car for several years. He customized it how he wanted to. He put it on air ride, so basically the car like lay down on the ground. And John has a pretty big internet following on Instagram and social media, and he had hinted that he wanted to sell this car. So basically, when he hints about selling a car, there are several hundred people that are like, okay, I want to buy this car.
Wow.
So needless to say, one person got in contact with him and said, I have to have the car. I'll pay whatever you're asking.
Oh my God.
But I want to buy it. So John was like, all right, I'll sell you the car for this much. And the guy was basically like, I'll give you $1,000 more if you can wait for a month until I can come get it, because this guy lived in LA, which, as you know, from New Hampshire is like 3,200 plus miles away, and
literally the other side of the country.
literally as far as you can go
Yeah.
across the country. So yeah, so transporting a vehicle the whole way across the country is really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy was going to come get it. I think he was going to send, he had a contact that basically did this. He shipped cars coast to coast or whatever. They just had a truck and trailer, and that's all they did. So John was like, "Okay, I'll think about it." And then, as John is, he thought about it some more, and he got back in contact with the guy in LA, and he was like, "Hey, would you mind if I drove the car out to you?" And the guy was like, "Yeah, I don't care. Just, yeah, drive it
Wow.
out here, whatever." So John gets in contact with me and he's like, "Hey, I'm thinking about driving the BMW out to LA. Like, is that something you'd be interested in?" And I was like, "Absolutely." First of all, just to see the entire country, because I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
I've only been up and down the East Coast. I'd been to Texas once or twice. I'd been to Arizona once or twice, but I'd never been to California, and I'd never been to any of the other states on the way driving out to the West Coast.
Mm.
So basically at this point I'm like, yes, I'm in. I'm in for this trip. So from there, we basically planned to drive 10 to 12 hours a day and get to a major city that night basically.
Yeah.
And we would plan a car meet, because I didn't mention before, but John started a car club, which
Mm-hmm.
is worldwide and has a massive following as well. So basically, he was able to set up these car meets in major cities all the way out. And yeah, people, like tons of people came. But
Mm.
anyways, so this was still in the planning stages. So basically, we planned to drive 10 or 12 days to a major city, have a car meet, go to bed, wake up, drive another 10 to 12.
That sounds like
Which
hell to me.
on paper, it looks decent, because if you get up at 4 a.m., you're where you're supposed to be by 2 or 3 in the afternoon, right?
Okay.
Well, the story gets deeper, but I'm gonna finish the part where I got laid off of the job. Well, I basically got fired from the job
Okay.
because I took the trip. So I'll get back to that, because the story gets deeper. So we had all that planned out. We were gonna make 4 stops, and on the fifth night we would be in LA, and we would have a car meet in LA. And on the sixth day, we would basically deliver the car to its new owner and make sure everything was good with the car, because we just drove it 3,200
Mm-hmm.
miles across the country. Actually, more than that, because we went a super southern route to like Virginia, Tennessee. We went super south and then across. So from there, the plan was to deliver the car, spend a couple of days in LA, like do the touristy stuff in LA, which I was totally down for. And then from there, we were gonna basically just hop on a plane, fly back home, and go back to life as usual.
Mm.
But within the next couple of days, while putting this plan together, the plot kind of got thicker.
And the plot thickens.
So how the plot thickens, John being John, found another car that he
Okay.
had to have, and that car happened to be in Seattle, Washington, which is, as you may know, like 10 hours north of LA or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So the tentative plan at that point would be do this whole entire trip out to LA, fly to Seattle, take a plane, fly to Seattle, buy this new vehicle, work on that vehicle for a day or two and make sure it's good for a trip, and drive it back home.
I'm
Another
tired
30.
just thinking about this.
I literally cannot tell you how draining that trip was, and how 2 weeks felt like 2 years in a car. But anyways, so basically the planning continued, and we were gonna fly to Seattle and pick up that car and then do the same thing on the way back. We were gonna plan meets. We were gonna do, like Montana,
Oh my God.
whatever, Chicago, New York. So that was the plan again. So going back to me basically sitting down with my boss and being like, "Hey, I know I've taken a ton of time off and like you're really pissed off about it already. But this cross country trip came up and I haven't seen the country, never mind driven from coast to coast. And it's something for me that I really need to do at this point in my life because I was like, not that I was getting like super old and you're never going to be able to do this again, but it kind of, I kind of felt that way.
YOLO is a
Um,
real thing.
it is a real thing. So basically, I explained that to him, and I was like, for some reason, I have to do this, and he was like, no, I get it, and I basically explained to him that I know it was like probably the worst decision as far as my career and working for him went.
Hmm.
And basically from there, he kind of okayed the trip. He was like, yeah, it really, another 2 weeks. Actually, it was like 2.5 weeks. So he was like, another 2.5 weeks without you here is kind of, it's really going to hurt productivity.
Hmm.
We have a lot of projects to do. Because at the time, it was me and one other technician,
Wow.
Dave, in this whole shop. And it was like down to us to finish all these projects. So basically, me leaving was half the productivity of the shop.
Right.
So, and I told him that I was like, I totally understand it's cutting productivity in half when I leave, but for whatever reason, I have to go.
Hmm.
So he kind of okayed the trip. He wasn't like super happy about it, and I understood. And basically, I was like, when I get back, like I'm just gonna work twice as hard and like make this up to you because I do feel bad for leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of left it at that. Planning continued for this trip. We basically got in contact with people from each city that we had planned on stopping in to help with where to have a car meet, where we were going to stay, because a lot of the times we were staying with friends of ours rather than getting a hotel to save money and
Mm-hmm.
just save a hassle, basically. We got up to about 2 weeks before we were going to leave on this trip, and my boss sent me an email. He didn't even talk to me. He sent me an email and he said, I cannot okay this time off. We have too much work. So you need to tell whoever you're going with that you can't go.
Hmm.
He worded it kind of like that. And I saw the email and I was like, nope, too late now.
Wow.
So a couple of days later, I think he sent that on like a Friday, and I had the weekend to think about it, and I went in on Monday, and I went right into his office, and I'm like, listen, man, I'm too deep into this. I have so much planned. I have so much invested. I can't back out of this now, even if I like had a change of heart.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going. And he was like, obviously really upset by that. He didn't fire me right away, but yeah, he was definitely upset. And I kind of like we had talked about it and we were kind of okay. And I was like, listen, like I may know somebody that can like cover for me while I'm gone and like maybe able to help out like here and there. And basically, I went on the trip from
Wow.
there. Yeah, it came up to the time we were leaving. I went on the trip. We did this whole crazy time warp of an experience driving across the country. And so getting deeper into that, like I said, on paper, it looks really good,
Mm-hmm.
driving 10 to 12 hours a day, having a car meet, going to bed by 10 a.m., I mean 10 p.m., and then being up at 4 a.m. to drive again. Well, it never works like that. Never
Right.
ever. 10 or 12 hours of driving turns into 14 or 15,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you forget to take into consideration the time change, which we did a few times.
Oh. Yep. That's a thing.
Yep. So the time change, a few of them across the country, which you forget to include. And then you get to these car meets and you see and meet people that you've only known like on the internet
Mm-hmm.
or like in the basically, yeah, on social media, or you haven't seen them in a long time and you want to catch up. So basically, at every car meet, we'd end up talking and hanging out until like 1 or 2 or 3 a.m. sometimes.
Wow.
And then we'd go to whoever's house we were staying at, and we'd go to bed for an hour or two,
Oh my gosh.
and we'd wake up at 4 and hit the road. And
Whew.
literally like, yeah, I can't even explain how taxing it
Yeah,
was.
you must have
But
been
at
a
the same,
zombie.
yeah, we definitely were. And what's funny is we vlogged the whole thing. We documented the whole thing, and it's on John's YouTube.
Okay,
So if anyone listening is interested in seeing people change from humans into zombies like that,
we'll link it.
yeah, that is definitely a timeline of how people turn into zombies. But at the same time, we were taking in the scenery of driving coast to coast,
Mm-hmm.
basically, which is like I had said before, it was huge for me.
Yeah.
And still to this day, I'm so thankful that I actually decided to take this trip rather than go to my day job.
Sometimes that's the right choice.
Yeah,
Sometimes choosing, you know, your own experiences over your career is the right choice because like you said, like, you're still young, but you're not getting any younger. And this is
exactly.
something that you had wanted to do. So it probably, wouldn't be something that you'd be able to necessarily do again for a while. So when those opportunities come up, you have to take advantage of them.
Right, exactly. And when I think about it deeper, I think about all the connections that I made with people around the country
Yeah.
and in different parts of the country that I know for a fact in the future I will work with them on a business platform,
Mm-hmm.
whether, you know what I mean, whether it's people on the West Coast that have cars that we want on the East Coast, or we have cars on the East Coast that they want on the West Coast, or whatever. Making those connections that I made on that trip was huge for me, and I know it'll pay off in the
Yeah.
long run.
It paid off for you before, so it definitely is going to pay off for you again.
Absolutely.
So you come back to no job once you're done
Ye-
with the trip.
Yes. Basically, I come back, and we had kind of planned that I would come back in like a part-time kind of basis.
Okay.
I at that point when I left for the trip, like I said, I wasn't fired from my job. I didn't walk away like knowing that I'd come back and not have a job.
Oh, okay.
So basically, I came back and I was gonna go back on like a part-time basis while working on this other venture with John because we wanted to open up a shop
Hmm.
together and basically do what we had in mind for a shop. Not that I didn't love the performance aspect, but we just had a different plan.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So so yeah, needless to say, I come back and things didn't really work out to going back part time at that job. But at the same time, I'm still on good terms with everyone there. I still, like I said, I still go to their shop and visit all the time as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Dave is still to this day one of my best friends, and like I feel that he's still on like a little bit higher of a level automotively than I am, so I still view him as a mentor.
Hmm.
And I think that's a good thing, is having a friend that I can still learn things from.
Yeah, definitely. So what did you end up doing next?
Basically right when I got back from this trip, all that had happened, and I kind of realized that I wasn't going to have steady income.
Hmm.
And I ended up doing basically what I'd done before. I ended up helping out friends here and there at their shops
Yep.
just because I had friends that needed help, basically. One of these friends, my friend Justin, he owns a restoration shop a couple of towns over from me. And I had basically gone in there with the intention of like helping him on a few projects that he didn't really specialize in. He specializes basically in old air-cooled Volkswagens and Porsches,
Hmm.
and he had a few customers with newer BMWs that he wasn't quite specializing in, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to like help me fix these?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know them up and down, you know what I
Hmm.
mean?" So I went in and basically helped where he needed, and from there we kind of hit it off. We vibed. He's someone that you would expect works on old Volkswagens. He's super friendly, super bubbly.
Does he have a big
Um,
beard?
no, he doesn't have a big beard,
Damn it,
but
that's what I imagined.
I know he could grow one, but maybe we'll talk him into growing one. So basically we hit it off. I enjoyed going to work there, and that kind of turned into a more like normal thing, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? And basically the first of the year was coming around this past year,
Hmm.
2020. He basically sat me down and he's like, "Hey, I know you have a lot of experience in a lot of different vehicles, but would you want to come work here as a full-time technician and basically, yeah, work here?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, I like the preservation and restoration aspect, where before at the previous shop, it was like performance. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It was race cars. It was like making them look good was kind of the last thing on their minds.
Hmm.
And at this new shop, it was going back to taking cars that hadn't run in 20 or 30 years, that had been in a barn or like been out in the woods, all rusty. People may never save them. They may never run again.
Yep.
But for some reason, somebody wanted to fix it, so they'd bring it to us and we'd restore them and get them running again. And yeah, I've always loved that. So basically, when he was like, "Do you want to work here?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So that's what I'm doing currently.
Yep. And how long have you been there?
I started part-time there last fall when we
Okay.
got back from this trip. So I've only technically been a technician there since the beginning of this year, so 5 months.
Okay. And is it just you and the owner, or is there other people that work there as well?
No, it's actually just me and Justin.
Hmm.
Yep.
Do you like having that dynamic now?
I do, yeah. I don't want to say that in my old age I'm becoming more difficult to work with, but having been in the automotive field for so long, I have my own views of how things should be done.
Hmm.
And I find that when other people don't take all of the steps necessary to fix a vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
I get irritated.
Yeah.
And I've recently been voicing those opinions more often.
Hmm.
So going back to your question, yes, I like the dynamic of just the boss and me.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, we've gotten really busy, and it's to the point where Justin's mostly running the business end of it, and I'm basically the only one working on cars.
Mm-hmm.
He does work on the cars as well when he has time, but with a growing business, there's a lot like upfront to run. The phone is
Mm-hmm.
like always ringing.
Hmm.
There's always people, calling for quotes. Another thing we do is people will call and they'll have like a certain vehicle in mind, like from their childhood or one they've always wanted that they want to find and buy.
Hmm.
And we kind of have the connections and the know-how to go find those cars and buy them
Nice.
for these people. So there's always people calling.
That's cool. Well, it's like it seems very niche what you do. I feel like that's not something that a lot of people do anymore. Um,
Yeah, it definitely is.
and do you feel like doing the restoration is where your real passion lies?
Yes, I think that my passion is definitely in restoration. I don't know if this, like, I hate to say that this isn't where I want to work forever, but I know deep down that I do want to own my own business,
Right.
and the views that I have for my own business aren't going to be primarily in restoration.
Okay. Are you able to speak a bit about plans that you have for the future, for your future business? Have you mapped that out?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, basically, I want to do several different things. And basically, like going back to my connections in the automotive world that I've made, having those connections makes things that I want to do easier.
Hmm.
One of the major things that I want to do is basically travel the world, find vehicles in different parts of the world, some of which that we've never had in the States or are hard to find in the States, and basically find these cars in different parts of the world and get them back to the States, get them back to our shop, my shop, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
work on them, build them how I want to build them, and then eventually put them up for sale. But all along, like throughout this whole process, documenting, like, we went to England and found this car, and like,
Mm.
here's a video of us like going to look at this car wherever it is, and here's a video of us getting it to port and like shipping it back to the States and us picking it up. And like, here's a video of what we're doing to it to customize it. And then when we go to sell this vehicle, it'll have a documented story of where it came from, what's been done to it, and all that. So it's kind of like a tangible thing to go with the car, which I think is a pretty cool thing and something that I want to do.
Yeah. And I think the story would definitely add value, and it would show people like how hard you really work to get the car to where it's at.
Absolutely.
It sounds like American Pickers, kind of like American Pickers 2.0.
Yes. Worldwide pickers.
Yeah, worldwide pickers. So is there any like set timeline for that right now, or is that just something in the future?
It's just something in the future. Like I've mentioned, John is basically the other person that I plan to do all of this with. Basically, where I am working now, I enjoy it so much that I think that planning this in the background it's kind of good to be able to go to a job that I enjoy while planning this.
Yep.
That way there is no timeline. That way, if like say if I did make a timeline and I didn't meet something, I would kind of feel bad. And so yeah, I think I'm hopefully doing this the most correct way. And going way back to when I ran a business by myself before, I know that there are a lot of steps that I want to take before I basically open the doors and be like, all right, I have my own shop now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go into it, legalities and all that fun stuff.
Exactly. And another big thing is capital to open a business. As of right now, I don't have a lot of capital to open a business. And I know because of the depth that I want to go into, once I do actually open it, I'm going to need some capital saved up.
Right.
Basically.
I guess I'm going to ask you like 2 more questions and then we're going to wrap this up.
Okay.
Favorite place that you've visited, I guess, worldwide?
That is a very good question. And I'm basically going to answer it by saying the drive between southern Germany into Austria going through the Alps was by far the most like mind-blowing drive I've ever done. 2 years ago, we did a whole Euro tour. We basically started in England, drove through the Euro tunnel. Basically, you drive your car onto a train and it drives through to France. So from France to Belgium to Germany, we spent several days in Germany and then drove south to Austria. So we left in the middle of the night from Germany, and basically when we got to the Austria border, the sun was just coming up, and like seeing the sunrise come up over the Alps while driving, like, yeah, and we were with friends from Germany that had like amazing show cars, and just being in those cars in that environment was the most amazing thing of my life for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I've only seen like videos and like pictures of the Alps, but I would love to go there. Like, it seems like the most beautiful place.
Yeah, it really is. And we do have mountains here in the States, but like seeing mountains over there, they're just so much bigger and so much, just the views are breathtaking, like actually physically breathtaking.
Yeah. And then finally, I kind of just wanted to get like a final word from you, some input for anybody listening that wants to get into cars, maybe get into being a technician. How should they go about it? Do you have any advice for someone who wants to get into this?
Basically, I guess the best advice I can give is just start doing it, basically, is like the best advice I can give. Start doing it. And when you're working on a vehicle, there's always going to be a correct way to do things and like an incorrect way to do things. And if you always figure out the correct way to do it, it's going to set you up in the future to always do things the correct way. I mean, as we've mentioned before, making connections along the way is another huge part of any career, basically. But like I had mentioned before, I wouldn't have had half the jobs that I had if it wasn't for the connections I made.
Yeah. I know you didn't go this route, but do you think like technical school would be a good choice for somebody?
Yes and no.
Mm.
I think I have mixed views on technical school just because I've worked with other people that have done both. I feel, without being like super biased, I feel that going to technical school teaches you how to do things on paper.
Yeah.
And I feel that there's a huge difference learning these things, doing them like with your own hands.
Right.
Learning with firsthand experience is, for me anyways, other people may be different, but for me, that's the way I learn. Just doing the things is a better way for me to learn. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Corey, for being on the show. Your passion definitely shows through. And I think you've been able to highlight that you really need to live your life for yourself, whether that it means walking away from a career for an amazing adventure or, spending your money on something that you really love. I think you've kind of shown that as long as, you're making those connections and you're really doing what you love, like it's always going to work out. So there's always going to be another job or something else that's going to bring that money in for you. But there's really no getting back the time and the adventures that you've had.
Right. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.